for the person who's causing the harm, how do they talk about this?
It's easier to say and point to, it was that guy in the woods. That's the problem. It's the crazy guy over there. It's not my uncle. It's not my brother. It's not my son. It's not my husband, right? It's not me, right? Like, it's so much easier to point to other people and say they're the problem.
This culture needs to be taken to a place where it's safe for everyone to, live their lives and not in fear of sexual violence.
Privilege and power.
I think of wealthy white men purchasing sex. I think of wealthy white men going overseas and purchasing sex. But then I also think of like wasted gangs of like frat guys, right? And the sexual violence that exists on college campuses. And then I also think about the sexual violence that's silent. Sexual violence happens in all communities, regardless of gender, regardless of race and ethnicity. But when it comes to sexual violence and a lot of things in white communities, wealth and power and privilege keeps those things hidden from media and keeps those things hidden from society.
There's just victim blaming all over the place.
I do feel like a lot of people from my community who have had this realization are pained by it. Not only because it happened at all, but also because there's nothing that we feel we can do about it.
So it's a story that's happening to someone else, and that provides just a safe amount of distance. And again, in white culture and in Midwestern, the culture that I come from, that distance is really important around kind of everything that's personal.
I think it depends on who you're sharing it with. If the person has some understanding of sexual violence, there might be some follow-up and how are you doing, and understanding that you've been through that experience and really helping you walk that path. If people either don't understand it or are very uncomfortable with the topic, I think it's one of those things that they try to avoid at all costs.
In theory, you would believe everything that the victim is saying, but it doesn't seem to turn out that way. Like, people go in with good intentions.
I think really working towards that self-care piece would make a big difference in the long run.
Practicing what it looks like to treat people as they all have equal value, and care about people's rights to their own body and that their experiences with us are good. That's what prevention looks like, is that like really, really connected relational way of being with one another. It doesn't come from the poster. It comes from the poster being very first step one, and then how do we actually get serious about understanding what this means to us in our community.
Again, I think prevention needs to start at a young level, a young age, and these boys need to be reached before it becomes ingrained in themselves and ingrained and further ingrained in our culture.
Right now, it just seems like men need to be having these conversations with each other.
For girls and feminine folk, it's we're aware that there's a problem that we're covering up, but for masculine and men, it's even worse. It's just buried even further down because nobody wants to talk about that at all.
There's a few things that can happen there, but it involves a lot of humility and taking leadership from others, and then also respecting and seeing ourselves in a light that that reflects our full humanity and the fact that we are people that can bring good to the world.
You know, we have to use the narratives and stories that people already understand to communicate our message, because we're never going to succeed otherwise. I think that if we use language, or if we aren't responsive to what the understandings of especially boys are understanding and think are things worth following, we're never going to succeed.